Unfortunately, I have some startling information for you in this video. Welcome to Ron's Basement. Thank you, yes, you, the one and only you, for joining me today. Gold and silver are at war, and we're going to talk about that in this video. But do you remember, like when we were learning about silver and gold, one of the fundamental things we always heard was gold and silver do well during times of high geopolitical strife, geopolitical conflict, times of war. And B, we were taught that gold and silver and the other precious metals do well during times of high inflation. What have we had over the last 2 years? Well, we've had the highest level of geopolitical conflict that I remember during my lifetime. And over the last year, we've had inflation like we haven't had in 50 years. What do we get? We get poor performance from silver, from gold. Nothing seems to make sense to us. But is there still a strong fundamental argument for the precious metals? In this video, we're going to focus in on the geopolitical side. I've got 3 key things that we need to talk about, one of which nobody talks about. But as we take a step back and try to look at the forest through the trees, it's important that we keep things in perspective, right? The sky is not completely falling. It's been painful over the last year and a half for precious metal investors, but the fundamental argument for holding them in your portfolio, I believe, remains. Let's talk about this right now. And there's 3 things I feel confident that I can say about you. Number 1, you are joining me here in the basement from all over the world. So we're getting a very diverse perspective on what's going on throughout the world. Number 2, the people that enjoy my videos tend to be of a little higher intellectual horsepower. I don't want to say smarter or sound arrogant, but my videos appeal to a sliver of what I believe are the smartest people on the planet today. Thirdly, we're nice people, probably most importantly as well. The people that come to my channel are very nice, kind-hearted people. I can say that with 100% confidence. So we don't like war. We don't like people's lives being literally destroyed through acts of violence by nations against each other. However, we didn't start the war, and we have to accept what's going on and analyze it as it relates to our investments because we want to provide safety and security to our families. Doesn't it feel like the importance, the criticalness of the situation unfolding in Europe right now, the war in Ukraine, the East versus the West? Does it feel like it's being underreported to you in the West? At least to me, here in the United States, it feels like most of my fellow Americans aren't able to grasp the seriousness of what's going on. We got some startling information out of Russia just earlier this week. They were responding to an initiative being pushed by the Ukrainians to kind of determine and develop this defined system, not to be part of NATO for Ukraine, but to have a defined defense agreement, kind of like NATO light, I guess you would call it. And the Russian leadership shot back with some startling remarks. I have to read these to you. I know you can read on your own, but I'll just go ahead and read to you what was said, and it is nothing less than shocking. The Kremlin's reaction to these moves by Ukraine were swift and fierce. Deputy Chairman of their Security Council, Russian Dmitry Medvedev, warning that it's really a prologue to the Third World War if it gets enacted. He described that nuclear holocaust would end as the result. Quote, And then the Western nations will not be able to sit in their clean homes laughing at how they carefully weaken Russia by proxy. Everything will be on fire around them. Their people will harvest their grief in full. The land will be on fire and the concrete will melt. That does not sound like an appealing situation to me, and that sounds like the Russians are very, very serious about what's going on in Ukraine and in this conflict. And I don't feel like a lot of people in the West, or most people in the West, realize just how serious this situation is. But for some reason, when it comes to China, the American public appears to be much more concerned, with results from a recent poll that showed that 40% of Americans believe that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, believes they are at war with the United States. These types of traditional geopolitical issues alone, that should have gold at $3,000, right? But we know where it really sits right now. Thank you, yes, you, for joining me right now here in Ron's Basement. You are somewhere in the world, and wherever you are important. It's an honor to me that you've decided to give me a little bit of your time here in the basement. If you enjoy my content, you can subscribe right here. Giving the video a thumbs up would be very helpful. There's a bell you can turn on to get notified, and leave a comment in the comment section below. Please, we learn so much from each other and from you. And secondly, this split between the East and the West that we're seeing. Have you heard the news about the new reserve currency that the Eastern countries are starting to develop? Russia, China, the other BRICS nations are developing their own reserve currency to move away from the US dollar, and that reserve currency will be anchored on real assets, things like silver, gold, oil. Also, Moscow announced they are starting their own new central hub for metals trading, an alternative to what currently exists in London and New York. They want to start their own market for silver and gold for all the Eastern countries. That will include the other precious metals as well, and it will determine a new spot price for the metals. This divide between the East and the West continues to grow, and that divide erodes confidence in fiat money, in things like the US dollar. It's only based on trust, right? It's not anchored to any real assets. We got off the gold standard 50 years ago, unfortunately. So as trust erodes throughout the world, the potential for a further erosion in the real absolute value of the Western fiat currencies definitely does exist. Nobody talks about this next point, but we know, and there's many theories and a significant amount of proof, that the Western governments have been at war with the precious metals for decades, had a concerted plan and effort to keep the value of the metals down. Has that been accelerated now because of this split between the East and the West? The Eastern countries, Russia, China, they produce a majority of the precious metals, and they buy tons and tons and tons of the precious metals, and they've expressed an explicit plan to develop a new reserve currency based partly on the precious metals. Is the West continuing this concerted war against the precious metals as part of the economic war going on now between the East and the West? And how long, if they are indeed doing that, can it be kept up? And are the Chinese and Russians laughing, saying, sure, we'll buy all your deeply discounted precious metals and add them to our central bank reserves? It's a very interesting idea. We do know that a few months ago, the U.S. government banned the purchase of any Russian gold. So it's not a far stretch to think that possibly the Western countries are making a concerted effort to keep the price of silver and gold down, to at least temporarily hurt the Russians and the Chinese and the other Eastern countries. Well, it sure feels like there's a lot of big, crazy stuff going on in the world right now. I don't think that most of us in the West really realize the severity of what is happening right now. But we gotta keep perspective. We have to see the forest through the trees. The trees are shaking right now, right? The wind is blowing. Gold and silver aren't really performing. It feels bad. But when we take a step back and look at it from a broader perspective, look at the whole forest, we can remember that for thousands of years, the precious metals have been valuable. And they've been valuable everywhere in the world. Gold and silver have always been valuable everywhere. They've seen these types of things happen before, geopolitical conflict, irrational changes in the price, but over the long run, right, when we take a step back, they tend to definitely maintain their value. Hey, I don't have a crystal ball, just my opinion that I am happy to share with you here in the basement. More importantly, I'm happier about the fact that you decided to join me today. I'll look forward to seeing you again, and until next time, be well.